This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, JZ Microphones, Spectra 1964, Atom Audio, and Isotope. You're hearing my voice right now on a JZ pop filter and BB29 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and Isotope RX and Ozone, all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD. So get ready to rock.
I had a sub mic on the amp itself with the spring reverb cranked. So while he's doing these drum takes, that spring is like getting triggered and it's also being picked up in all the microphones on the kit. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, this could be a nightmare later. It was the opposite. It was like the coolest thing on that song.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Liz Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. No matter where you like to rock in the galaxy, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron lets you record with confidence over USB-C with up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance. Transfer tracks in seconds and take your sessions with you wherever you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crush-proof. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. If you're ready to discover the secrets to making your mixes sound great no matter what your studio situation, then check out my free mixing course, mixmasterbundle.com, where I show you how to get great sounding mixes in your studio using simple techniques and free plugins. And when you're ready for more advanced studio skills, then check out recordingstudiorockstars.com/academy, where you can learn from Grammy-winning teachers to help you record, edit, mix, and master your best record ever. Use the code Rockstar right now at checkout for 10% off any course for a limited time. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Liz Shaw, and welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Micah Tawlks, a producer, mixer, and all-around music enthusiast based in Nashville, Tennessee. He began producing and mixing in 2011 and has worked with artists such as Louis Prince, Coin, Liza Anne, Hayley Williams, Halfnoise, the Brook and the Bluff, the Lone Bellow, and Molly Parden, to name just a few. Great sounding records. Micah grew up in Sacramento, California, and relocated to Nashville back in 2005, which is actually when I started my studio at the Toy Box, to immerse him in a more creative culture in hopes of growing as a singer-songwriter. While recording his debut album in 2008, he discovered that he actually was way interested in the recording process himself, which led him to redirect towards doing more production, mixing, and writing for other artists and projects. Micah works out of Peptalk Studio at his home in South Nashville. And a big shout out and a thank you to Cheyenne Medders for making our introduction. Cheyenne had suggested a couple of artists, and I remember, or a couple of guests. And when I clicked through and listened to your work, Mike, I was like, this is awesome. So I'm glad you're here, man.
Awesome.
Glad to talk to you. Please welcome Micah Tawlks to Recording Studio Rockstars. Micah, are you ready to rock, dude?
I am ready to rock.
Glad to have you here. Thank you. I think you're just joining us from your phone. We're still kind of all locked out of our studios a little bit here and there. I think you said you're actually doing a big studio change up, right?
I am. It's not crazy. I just have this my second room, which is kind of like a unfinished basement space that has like concrete floors and concrete walls. That space is finally getting finished out. I'm like putting a bathroom in and a little kitchenette and stuff like that. So it's almost more like it's functional studio space that's getting worked on, but it's also kind of more of the the creature comfort side of the studio that's getting an overhaul, which is exciting. So
what's all this talk about? There's no time for bathroom breaks when it's time to make music, man. People are supposed to be hunkered down, never taking a break, right?
Yeah. Except for when, so once in a while you do want to go get some hand claps in a bathroom though. So
yeah. How many home studios in the world where like you have to kind of walk through the house to go use the bathroom somewhere?
Oh my gosh. Well, we've been operating in that capacity for quite some time. And there's a certain point when you're like, okay, we're done with that. Like, I have my studios in my basement, which is only partially underground. It's like we're on the side of a hill. So there's actually rear access to the studio and sliding glass door, that kind of thing. So this will just make it that much more separated from normal home life. So it'll be nice.
That's awesome. And of course, we had some big changes last year, just kind of winning the whole home studio battle here in Nashville. So I always love hearing about everybody sort of finally, digging their heels in and getting their studio going the way that they want to finally.
Totally. Oh my gosh. Yeah. There was always a little bit of a fear wanting to do anything, that felt sort of permanent before, but definitely feeling a lot safer on that level now.
Yeah, totally. Well, so give us a little bit of an introduction more into who you are. You moved to Nashville as a songwriter and as an artist first, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So I came from Sacramento and I just started to basically, I had moved out here. I was dating a girl who was working on some music with Charlie Peacock. And I came out here to play guitar with her. And then one thing led to the next, and I started kind of like, playing my songs for Charlie, and Charlie would have me demo them with him once in a while and that sort of thing. And I was, keen on the idea of doing my own music for quite some time. And then, as you said in the little bio there, when I was making my first record with Kevin Daly, I kind of discovered at that point that I wanted to just keep making records, and was sort of unaware that what that looked like was production. And so I sort of fell into the production thing. I wasn't really calling myself a producer or anything.
Right. So going from artist to producer wasn't so much about wanting to do something different. It was about wanting to just keep doing stuff in the studio. Because if you're an artist, you make your record and now you're out of the studio for a while until you're back in, right?
Exactly. And I think it had a lot to do with that. It was the actual process of making my solo album was so fun. And I was so, in a non-dark way, happily obsessive about the whole process. It was like so fun, and I couldn't wait to be working on it every night, and like even troubleshooting things about the songs. And so it was a really fun process, and just realizing that I wanted to do that all the time. And also, like, there was a part of me that was constantly like, I also kind of wish I could hear someone else sing this song. And like that sort of like practical things where I'm like, oh, I think I actually just want to be a producer. I don't think I want to do this thing. Of course, like writing is still a thing that I love doing and love being a part of. But, in the grand scheme of things, it felt like it made more sense for me to start to pivot toward production. So,
yeah, totally. Well, obviously, you've done a pretty fantastic job of it. Rockstars, we've got a playlist in the show notes where you can go listen to Micah's work. This is, my feeling about this is one of the best collections of songs I've had from anybody on the podcast, and we're 300 episodes in now. So I think you're doing fantastic work with your production, with the artistry. I feel like there's a real consistency. Like every singer in there is somebody who I want to listen to sing. So I don't know how you pulled that off.
I think that was something they pulled off.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate that. That's very kind. I have loved working with everyone that I've been able to work with. It's been amazing.
So talk about a little bit, just give us an outline on what your role is in many of these records that are in your Spotify, in your discography. Are you both writing and producing and recording, mixing?
Yeah. So by and large, the the majority of the stuff in that playlist is like definitely recording, producing, and mixing. That's kind of the majority of it. And then there's occasionally songs throughout there that I'm co-writing on, and some like I just finished a record like less than a week ago with this artist Stephen Day, and I did not write a single song with him on that record. So, and that's maybe the first time in a while that I've worked on a record where I hadn't had some sort of writing collaboration. But it's never really a goal of mine to start off a project with someone and be like, oh, I want to try to write on this or whatever. Just kind of like, if it ends up happening naturally, wonderful. If not, like even better. And to a certain degree of like, wow, what a fun thing to just work on something that someone else wrote,
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, it's kind of all over the place. But for the most part, whatever I end up producing, I typically end up mixing, which is still like wild and awesome, and sometimes even strange to me that it keeps working out that way. But I typically am mixing everything that I'm producing as well.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely talk about that some here in a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, if you're not doing the writing, you're maybe not doing the mastering, but the playing, producing, and mixing, I'm excited to kind of dig into all those things with you.
Yeah.
What instrument is your, main instruments that you would be playing on stuff? Are you actually like programming drums? Are you playing all sorts of instruments, or strictly guitar or anything?
Mostly bass. Bass is pretty normal for me to be playing bass on something I work on.
You and Don Was, right?
Who is that?
Don Was, producer, a known producer for bass player. He had the band Was Not Was, but he produces a ton of stuff.
Oh, I'm not familiar. Oh, I should look into that. Yeah. That's great. That's a whole other conversation there. Like bass player producers, I feel like it's such a thing. It's like
it's totally
Justin Meldau Johnson plays on a lot of his stuff, and
Brad Jones was my mentor coming up, and he's totally a bass player producer.
That's funny. It's a funny thing. I don't know. But yeah, bass is like something that is pretty frequent. And then of course, keyboards and lots of drum programming, and actually sing a lot of background vocals on things that I work on. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, people keep letting me do it. And so
I found that too. I've been able to do that. I'm really surprised at how easy it is to make that work.
Totally. I think I've like, after a period of time with something like that, you get into like a flow of the way you do it, and it just goes fast, and you can sketch out a lot of ideas really fast and kind of be like, here's this idea. What do you think of this? And, a lot of times it just ends up getting kept because it's something that they were into. So,
well, it's a lot faster than like bringing the artist in, and then you have to come up with a line in the control room over the speakers, then teach it to them on a keyboard, then send them out to the mic, then have them try it to see if it's any good.
Oh my gosh. I know. And when it's in your head, it's just so much faster to just get it out there real quick, But yeah, so bass and some vocals and keyboards and programming. I don't play drums. I do play drums, but I wouldn't dare try to record myself playing drums. I'm not that good. And then some guitars here and there, stuff like that.
Okay, cool. Well, let's, before we get deeper into those things, because those are all things I'd love to talk to you about, let's talk about your studio. I know it's torn apart right now, but why don't we talk about what you're planning? I mean, like how are you going to set up your tools so that it makes it really easy for you to make great records?
Yeah. So one of the things I implemented like right at the start of the sort of stay at home vibe was I decided, because I have two rooms, like I have a control room and then I have this other kind of drum room sort of thing. I just hated the disconnection, like visual disconnection. So I bought some TVs, some flat screens, and I bought a home security system and set up cameras between the rooms which I found out afterwards is like something that quite a few people do. But I thought it was so brilliant. I was like, oh my gosh, I spent $500 on this system, and I've got like. But the thing that's rad is it's hardwired, and so there's hardly any latency. So I can like
really.
Yeah, it's amazing. I can watch, and it's funny. It even has like the date and time up in the right and left hand corner. It looks very much like like home security footage kind of vibe.
Do you remember which one you got by any chance? Is that
know what it was called? It has a dumb name where like video is part of it, but it's like spelled weird or something. I'll take a picture of it for you and send it.
Is it something that you like? If we wanted to try something like this, do we just go to Home Depot and go get it, or is it more like you had to order it online?
I looked up on Amazon. I looked up home security system hardwired. I just put a ton of things like that in there.
Okay.
And it was the first thing, and I was troubleshooting. I had tried some wireless things, and there was just way too much of latency, and it was driving me crazy to like watch someone playing drums and there'd be like, a huge delay. So I finally started thinking through the like hardwire aspect, and just found this cheap one. I was like, I'm going to try this, and if it sucks, I'll send it back. And it ended up working great. So yeah.
Okay. Well, I apologize. I'm going to geek out. I love to. This is what this show is for. But let me break that down a little more. So if you've got multiple rooms, maybe you can do a lot of things, but let's just focus on like, okay, we've got a control room, and then we've got another room across the house where the drums are that we can't see. So how do you set something like this up? You've got your screen in the control room that you're already using for your computer. Does that one bring in the camera? Or do you set up like a second screen with the camera?
I set up. So yeah, this is great. I'll try to go through this clearly. So two TV. I have two screens set up. I have one in the drum room, and then I have one that's dedicated for this in my control room, and it's mounted to my wall above my computer, so I can just glance up there. And the key to this is putting the camera as close to the screen as possible, so that when you're looking at the screen, it looks like you're looking at the person, kind of thing. Right,
totally.
So basically just running those wires between these two units. So you have to have a unit for both ways.
And I see. So it's like you're getting two individual systems, one-way things.
Yeah. And I think there were $250 a piece for the systems. And then the TVs I bought were $88 a piece. They're 32-inch flat screens. And it was like, they were on sale. I was like, this is great. I didn't even know if I was going to like it. So I was like, I'm just going to go with the cheap route. Yeah. So I did it, and it changed everything. It like instantly felt more connective, like even in ways that I felt like I haven't even experienced in high visibility studios. Like, you'll have like a window, but sometimes if you're sitting down at the desk, you have to stand up to look out that window. Right. You can't just like, or if like the drummer is off in the corner, sometimes you can't even see him and see if he's fidgeting with something, or like maybe is like hitting his, messing with his monitor controls too much or something like that. So it just overall, it helps to sort of like bring this awareness between you, and also lots of physical feedback. I mean, I'm like never sitting down when someone's playing in the other room. I'm normally like up, kind of like dancing around like an idiot.
Yeah, totally.
So, and I think that energy just kind of like translates well into better takes and more like, less disconnection,
I agree 100%. I like to dance around and get like way in. I feel like if the take's not happening, I dance harder.
Oh, me too. Me too. Me too. And it's also so fun. It's like, we're doing this because it's such a blast to be doing it together. Like, it's so fun to make music with people. Yeah. And to be doing this. And so if there's, extended hours where you're like in separate rooms, it's almost a bummer. So having some sort of physical thing. The other thing that was so fun about it that I didn't anticipate is everyone that comes in takes pictures of the TV screens now. So it's like this whole thing where it's like people love like, oh, you go in there and I'm going to like this whole thing. So it's like
funny.
always getting tagged in these like silly photos of band people taking pictures of each other. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm so ready to be the only one dancing in the studio. But, you know, if my girlfriend was to ask me like, come on, let's go dance at the show, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know. I might just sit here.
That's definitely me as well. Yeah.
With so many game-changing iZotope plugins to choose from, deciding which one to buy next could be a bit of a challenge. But did you know that now you can have all their plugins through iZotope's new affordable subscription bundle, Music Production Suite Pro, for only $19.99 per month? Get your Rockstar extended 30-day free trial subscription now at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Do you need to record direct stereo keyboards? Spectra 1964 now offers the Stereo BBDI2 with custom wound high-Z transformers for big headroom, virtually flat response, and a 15 dB input pad. The Spectra 1964 BBDI passive direct box is also perfect for recording deep bass that will make your mixes sound huge. Plug that into a C610 complementer, and as founder Bill Cheney points out, it'll move your pant leg. Get your sound moving at Spectra1964.com. All right, cool. Well, you know, another thing about the video idea that's so cool is, you know, you might have line of sight in a studio, but that musician is pretty far from you. Mm-hmm. Whereas the camera is now like kind of right up in their business, you know, like
totally,
you know, in the same way that the camera's maybe standing where you would have stood if you were playing guitar and like, you know, hovering over the drummer, getting into it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the security cam thing is so fun. And you can get them pretty close to the people, but like, I feel like at some point it probably exists somewhere and I just don't know how to look for it, but someone needs to make a much like cleaner version of this, because I think it would be useful in almost every studio, because there's always some situation in which you want to see someone closer, or like, I don't know, you know, it's more of a, it's just way more connective.
So there is a studio in East Nashville called Ivy Hall, and an engineer, Eric Loomis. Eric, we have yet to get you on the show. Do
it, Eric.
Yeah, so he set up their studio in a way that he found really high quality, like super low latency, hardwired video feed. But I remember him describing it as a very expensive option. So, you know,
gotcha.
While it might be cool to get another thing, you may have like, you know, figured out the perfect solution for home studios for sure, you know?
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It's pretty funny looking.
Well, that's groovy. Okay, cool. So you got the video feed, and I guess you could do this for multiple rooms, but then you'd end up in the control room. You'd end up with like 5 different TVs or something.
No, well, the thing that's cool so in the control room is the only one. You can put up to 8 cameras for that one, for each unit.
I see.
And you can actually split the screen, which is really rad. So I could have 4 cameras at 4 different angles from 4 different rooms or whatever, or all of the same room. And I could see every single one of those on my screen.
Oh, that's cool. That makes it easy.
Yeah. So, and you can split it up into 8 or 4 or 2, I think. So
groovy.
Yeah, it's great.
I'm excited. I'm getting video. Man.
Do it. It's so fun.
All right, dig it. What about other things? Like, what about your monitors? Are you going to have a mixing console? Do you like to work strictly with, you know, a keyboard and a mouse?
Yeah. So I'm mostly in the box. I have a minimal amount of outboard gear that I love running things through. I've got 2 different tape echoes, Korg Stage Echo SE500, and then I've got a RE201, and then I have an old Tascam tape, a 4-track tape machine. It's actually a mastering deck that I run stems through.
Oh, cool! Just to get a sound on things.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like running it through multiple times, and then suddenly the drums sound gushier and weirder, and you know.
Is it a 3-head? Is it cassette or is it a?
No, it's a 1/2-inch mastering deck. Yeah.
So it's got a 3 head, so you can record onto it and play it right off the repro, or do you record and then rewind the tape? And okay,
I record and rewind the tape and play it back into Pro Tools.
Okay, cool, cool.
Yeah.
Maybe give us some hints as to how something like that would work. We might be stuck on the idea of like, doesn't that mess up the timing of things? But maybe this is pre that, and maybe you don't care about the timing yet.
Right, totally. Well, a lot of it is just like, because I'm stemming stuff out, it'll be like a stereo stem that gets run through, and then I'll just realign it. And the places where it gets, maybe it like wanes a little bit is typically so minimal that I can't even tell. If I can tell, I will just cut it in Pro Tools and realign or whatever. But for the most part, yeah, I'm just like printing to the tape and then sending it back into Pro Tools as a stem. And normally this will happen toward the end of the process. So I've already kind of mixed drums and things like that, bass guitar, vocals. And then I'm like, I'm going to run this through here and see how it feels. And a lot of times it's just the right thing. Sometimes it's, you lose a little bit of high def that you might want. So It's not always the coolest, but yeah, that's one of the pieces I have. I have some borrowed gear that's pretty crazy. Just a good friend that has loaned me a Fairchild 660 that I've had for about 4 years in my studio. So I run stuff through that a lot. And that's
not a shabby piece of gear to have around.
No, man, it is like whenever it has to leave, I'm gonna like have a week where I just have to take off work and just cry because that has been such a fun piece of gear to have. But yeah, that and a Neumann U47 from the 50s that he's loaning me. So both of those.
I'm going out on a limb here, but one of the company that makes gear available to you, the one Access Analog, am I saying it right? You probably find yourself a 660 or a 670 there and just send your tracks over to it and get them back.
Oh man, really? They do that?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I did not know that.
Yeah, cool. It's a pretty cool thing, I mean, they do Access Analog is the company.
Okay.
So you can use them as plugins, even on a mix. You can use analog gear, which I haven't really tried all that, but I imagine that some things like running stems out and getting them back again and then mixing from that would be a really cool process.
Wow, that's awesome. Oh my gosh, I need to do that.
There you go, man. All right, cool. So let's see here. Let's keep moving forward. So you're mostly in the box. So you're like keyboard and mouse, and do you have like a MIDI keyboard in front of you all the time, or a drum pad or any of those tools?
No, I don't. I actually have my MIDI keyboard on a little gate hinge on my desk. It's hard to describe, but it's always kind of off to the side. It looks like it's leaning up against the side of the desk.
Okay.
And then I can pull it around whenever I need it. Because I hate MIDI controllers so much. I hate looking at them. I don't want to think about them. But most of my work is in the box. I'm like very weird when it comes to programming. I feel like the people that I've worked with have teased me over the years about how hard I make it on myself, because I will literally drop in like a bunch of samples into Pro Tools and I'll just start building the programming visually. Very visual when it comes to that stuff. So yeah, as far as like my flow, I do have a little, I have a Tascam M320B that sits on my desk in front of me, which I really only use for the pre's. And that's sort of like my
What is that? Is that the 4-track or something?
No, it's a 20-channel board actually.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it's a cool little board. Bought it a few years back when I didn't have any other outboard pre's, and was just using what was on my Apollo or whatever. And then I started to buy some stuff, and so now that's kind of my like secondary thing. But yeah. My workflow is kind of that as far as gear that sort of surrounds me. It's pretty chill. I have some ATCs, what are they called? The 25s or whatever.
Okay. Those are your monitors.
I love those so much.
Are those big, huge ones, or are those like?
No, those are the smaller ones. They're like just before the 45, so they're kind of like they're three-way speakers, but they're kind of like on the lower end before it's like the real low end stuff. So
right. So maybe talk more about that, like as far as like what kind of monitoring you need to have in your space to be able to confidently both record stuff in that writing production stage, but also mix stuff and make sure that you're getting your mixes right.
Totally. Yeah. So, as far as monitoring goes, I've operated with, Tannoy System 800s almost the entire time that I've been doing this. And,
wow.
Tannoy System 800s are not fancy speakers. You could buy a pair of them on eBay for $600 if you wanted to right now. They are great speakers though. They sound awesome. And, I just bought these ATCs this year.
So you're almost still learning them.
Yeah, very much so. As far as what you need, I feel like, most everything that is up actually, that you've listened to was all mixed on my Tannoys.
Okay. Well, they sound great, man. I mean, your mixes sound killer.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
So as far as like, finding speakers that are right for you and that sort of thing, I think that, having something that you just know and trust and you know what they sound like and you get comfortable with them, it, to me, is always the move. And it doesn't have to be, they don't have to be fancy. They don't have to be whatever. I definitely got to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing so much mixing and I've literally never invested in monitors because those monitors were given to me
right.
by a studio that was shutting down like 12 years ago.
And they're what do you call them? I don't know what they're called. They're inline. So the tweeter is in the center of the cone.
Yeah, the tweeter's in the center of the cone. So there's like it's all compacted into that one thing, and they're just two-way speakers.
Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class studio for professional mixing and mastering. Their unique accelerated ribbon tweeter design is famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear into your music, allowing you to focus on the mix. Visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for lots of cool free interviews, tutorials, masterclasses, and learn how to set up your studio monitors and control room. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings that classic vintage tone. Our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Recording Studio Rockstars listeners. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the V67, V47, or the new V12 microphone at JZ Mike.com. Do you use anything else to check your mixes on too? Do you mix in mono, or do you have like a process of going to the iPhone or the car or any places like that?
No, yeah. I mean, I'll pop over to the car from time to time and listen both in my car and my wife's car. But no, I don't. Not in the studio. I have another stereo in the studio that's like an old Sony stereo that sometimes I'll, upload something to Dropbox or whatever, and then I'll just listen real quick over there to kind of get the lay of the land. But for the most part, I stay on my monitors and do some headphone listening here and there at night. Not a whole lot.
I'm surprised to hear you say you don't do a lot of headphone listening, because your mixes are super headphone fun to listen to.
Yeah, that's such a cool thing. I love listening to music on headphones. I kind of psych myself out a little bit if I listen to my mixes on headphones too much, because there's a constant thing of like, oh my gosh, I could completely rearrange the panning in this song. Like panning is very much a like first things when it comes to mixing for me. I love finding space for things and letting them live there, and depth of fields, so to speak, or something.
Yeah.
But I try to mix, just like anyone else, I end up at super high volumes by the end of the day. And I am constantly telling myself, like, turn it back down, turn it back down, turn it back down.
Yeah.
So I feel like once I get into those lower volume modes is where I can really focus and get a lot of that stereo spectrum stuff worked out. So it doesn't come from using headphones, though. Just comes from kind of, I think, bringing the monitors down a little bit and focusing a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would describe your production and mixes as extremely arrangement aware and not afraid to keep things minimal to create power, where you give yourself a lot of room to expand dynamically in the production, which I think is cool and sometimes rare. You also the bass and the drums and stuff sound super well balanced and like really punchy, and like you want to crank up your tunes, which was cool.
That's awesome.
And again, the singers, like, you got a real appreciation for the singer and what they're trying to do, so that gets respected in the mix, which is cool. I'm just saying lots of nice things about your mixes.
Oh man, that's so great.
But then you also like always have these fun little candy elements in there, like whether it's totally different, morphing treatments for the vocals, or like, this it's a short delay on this one, but now it's a long reverb, but now it's whatever. And then there are like little fun, butterfly sounds that just kind of come in and out of the mix, hiding in the background there. What's that all about? How do you describe that? Do you have a name for it?
No, I don't. I think I'm not sure what the butterfly sounds would be, but
just like let's say there's bass, drums, keys, guitars, and vocals, but then there's like this stuff that just like kind of flies around and goes across the stereo spectrum.
A lot of that is like my probably like dumb obsession with my tape echoes. I just like them so much, and playing around with those is always fun. I think as a whole, to me, the way I'm like looking at the production is you have your primary elements that are so important. They're so important to be almost equally interesting. So if it's drums, you just mentioned drums, bass, vocal. That's like such a common thing for me. But whatever it is, those things are primary, and so they get a lot of attention. But then there are these things that have to kind of interact with them in such a way that are harmonically reminding you to listen in a new way to this next line or whatever, or pulling your attention to maybe something in the bass line that you didn't notice before, but because it's sort of answering or finishing the phrase, so to speak, or something like that. It kind of ends up pulling you back in and developing the bass part, or maybe the lyric, the vocal part a little bit more. So yeah, but that's fun. I think a lot of it is just being like, man, this sounds weird.
No, I like
do that.
I like that idea of what you're suggesting. Is sometimes the parts we need to add to a song are, they're in the same way that rap will add ad libs that double certain lyrics and phrases. Yes. It's like looking for musical bits that just finish the sentences of another instrument. Totally.
Yeah,
that's cool.
And then another big part of this, I think, is like that is so super important is the people you are working with. Are such a huge part of this. It's the musicians that I get to work with, I end up working with a lot of the same musicians between records because I love what they do. I love their creative expression. And I know that if I have, like, let's say Dan Burns, who plays drums on a lot of stuff that I work on, or Kevin Daly, who plays keys and, oh my gosh, guitars and bass and just a bunch of random stuff on lots of projects that I work on. Those guys, like, when they come in, there's a sort of communication of like, this is the feeling that we're going after. Now let's go after that feeling. And they always bring so much of that interest to what we're doing. So a lot of that credit goes to them as well. And the people all of the folks, the artists themselves that I get to work with. So.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, of course, we all hear stories about, Motown and Muscle Shoals and the Wrecking Crew and, these groups of musicians that will play together every day on records. But I think it's a good reminder to us as engineers or as producers, I mean, particularly, is like you want to have your colors in your palette, but like finding musicians that you really like to work with and doing it regularly is like a form of having a color in your palette to work with too.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, it totally is. It's so great.
Yeah. Give us a little bit more insight into, what the beginning of a process is in the studio for you. So you've got the artist in there. When do you bring in the musicians? When is the, is the band playing together live, or are things sort of moment by moment, one instrument at a time?
Yeah, it's kind of moment by moment. Something that has developed more is spending more time in pre-production to sort of, like with the record that I just worked on, for instance, relatively a small amount of pre-production time, but really just listening through demos. And in this case, they were like voice memos. They were not fleshed out demos for the Stephen Day record I just worked on.
Voice memos are my favorite.
Oh my gosh. It was actually kind of one of the coolest things ever. I was like, wow, he's just playing guitar and singing a song. Like, this is insane.
It leaves a lot more room for your imagination, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And and to his credit, he really wanted that. I think he was like, I don't want to try to develop this or like produce this up front. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that was something he didn't want to do this time. He wanted to go, what is your initial reaction to this? What is, that sort of thing. And the same thing for Louis Prince. We'll sit down and we'll like listen to a bunch of demos and kind of go through things and literally just start making notes on each of the songs. And I have no idea. I'm assuming this is how a lot of people work, but just writing down phrases, even like sometimes it can be really abstract. There was literally a song that was like, for Stephen Day, it was like Miles Davis and Nina Simone on the left and D'Angelo and John Mayer on the right.
That's awesome. and like that was a note to yourself for how, what to go for.
We were like wanting to create in this song. This song is very like moody and almost like neo soul-ish, but we were wanting to like implement, like do it in such a way where it almost felt like there were two versions of the song existing within the stereo spectrum. Nice. And that the sort of jazz vintage version was all the way on one side and that kind of thing. So it's like things like that will happen where it's like there was a time I was working with Alexander Wren and we were like, he played me a song and we ended up with writing down like the Beatles go to Mexico with Johnny Cash and record a song with Jeff Emmerich there. And nice. it was something like that. It was something really absurd. So we knew that we wanted this sort of like mariachi element. And then we also knew that we wanted it to be kind of Beatlesy, but this whole thing. So sometimes it'll be really abstract phrases, and then other times it's really straightforward, like you're literally saying like big open drums, or whatever, like super synth bass or whatever, like dumb things, to kind of help you map it out. So typically at the most spend a couple of days doing that with an artist, and then we'll dive in tracking. And a lot of times if I'm working with a solo artist, it's a lot of upfront sort of pre-tracking things. I don't like tracking things as scratches. I like to think of everything as a possible keeper,
Right. Yeah.
So like I will take the extra time, mic up the guitar amp with the 3 mics that I want to put on the guitar amp, and that sort of thing. Use the 47 for the scratch vocal and be like, we're going to get 3 takes of the scratch vocal, sort of thing. Just in case it's just, there's something there, and there often is. And so it ends up being this fun thing. And then with a solo artist, again, a lot of drum programming on the front end, bring drummer in later in the process once we've kind of figured out the whole mode of the song, the way it's going to move. That way the drummer can come in and we can be super efficient. And then it changes with different bands. Worked with the Brook and the Bluff on their last 2 records. One is coming out this year. But the Brook and the Bluff, we tracked so much of their new record live. And in my little studio, that's a funny little vibe, because we're all like spread out between 2 rooms and it's kind of like awkward, but it ends up being so fun.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Now you got video cameras, right?
Yeah. Now we got video cameras. So that was actually a lot more connective this time around. And I've got like dudes sitting right next to me with their instruments,
The STX 100D from the Spectra 1964 Custom Shop is the big brother to the now famous STX 100, a fully discrete mic pre with dual transformer isolated Spectra 101 amplifiers. The STX 100D is exactly the same original circuit found in Stax, Parden, Advision, A&M, and Record Plant recording consoles. The sonic performance is identical. Best of all, it will plug into a single space of your standard 500 lunchbox. And if you want to add the sound of the famous Spectra C610 complementer, then check out the new STX 600 modules, combining the STX 100 mic pre and C610 into a single 500 module. Now you can get the same incredible sound in your studio that worked for famous producers like Tom Dowd with the STX mic pre's BBDI and complementers. Go to Spectra1964.com or call 801-797-0642. I love using iZotope plugins for my music and podcast productions. In fact, you're hearing Ozone and RX on my voice in this podcast episode. And now you can get access to all the iZotope plugins through the new subscription bundle. For only $19.99 per month, Music Production Suite Pro is designed for the serious recording, mixing, and mastering engineer, putting the finishing touches on music, film, and podcasts with fully pro versions of Ozone, RX, Neutron, Nectar, Neoverb, Tonal Balance Control, Visual Mixer, and more, including free plugin updates. And just for you rock stars, get an extended 30-day free trial subscription at iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any individual plugin purchase. Coupon not valid for subscription. Hey, Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Micah Tawlks, joining us from Peptalk Studio. Actually, I guess you're not at Peptalk Studio because it's getting worked on right now, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
But right here in South Nashville, and you ready to jam, dude?
Yeah.
All right. So, you're talking about working with a band in the studio. Let's back up a little bit because you said a lot of cool things. First off, you mentioned choosing your 3 mics on the guitar amp. So first question we want to ask on Recording Studio Rockstars is, what 3 mics do you like to put on your guitars?
Yeah. It's constantly changing, but I have, like most people in the world, I have finally decided that there's always got to be a 57 on there because it's the right move. Sometimes I will put a Royer 121 right next to it. Other times I will swap the Royer 121 out for a Steger. I have one of those SR1As. And I love that thing on guitar amps. Awesome. And then always mic the back of the amp as well with a 4038.
Awesome.
And probably like 5 or 6 inches back from it. And then lately I have been taking a stereo room of the guitar amp as well. So my room is small. So really, it's only for the sake of putting Ocean Way on it later on that stereo room and just being able to sort of like shape a room that doesn't feel like it was,
cool.
two mics directly on an amp that then got turned into a room. It's actually a room mic that kind of like gets roomier. So
Ocean Way is the room plugin that gives you the sound of Ocean Way Studios, but you're saying that feeding it a stereo room mic seems to transition better into the Ocean Way room.
There's always something for me that feels a little bit like you can still tell that it was a mic that was directly on the source, kind of thing. So having a stereo room up or even just a mono room up that you end up putting Ocean Way on that it makes it like more believable to me. It might actually be what do you call that when you like just think it's happening? Placebo.
Placebo effect. Yeah. It doesn't matter. I mean, we're trying to make records in the studio. Feeling confident that you're having fun is like 90% of the battle. The rest of it just sort of happens by accident, right?
Totally. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. But yeah, and then sometimes the dynamics will switch out from dynamic mics will switch out. I have a EV-PL11 that's a really cheap microphone that I love the way it sounds on guitar amps.
Oh, cool.
So I'm always messing around with it. I don't do the same thing every time.
Is there anything we need to think about when we're putting multiple mics on an amp? Do we need to worry about their, phase relationships or being in the same distance? And like, how about that 4038 in the back? How does that play into it?
Yeah, man, that is like always an interesting, funky little number for me. Is like sometimes I'm like, man, this sounds brilliant, and I literally just put the mics up visually. I'm always trying to line the capsules up and like judging based on where I think they are and everything. And typically it works out, and I don't have any issues. But then there are moments when you'd think you're supposed to flip the phase. And I've heard people say, yeah, you flip the phase on the one that's pointed at the back of the amp because you've got two mics directly at each other. But then there's weird moments where you're like, you flip it and you're like, it actually sounded cooler the other way. So I guess I'm just going to leave it the other way. So technically I think that might be out of phase, but I just tend to like look for the, when I'm listening back, just flipping phase until I can kind of see it. And then I'll record a little piece like everybody does and like actually look at the phase alignment. But most of the time, if what I'm hearing, if I like the way it sounds coming out, sometimes I won't even check it because I'm just like, this sounds good. And I can tell it sounds good because it sounds good. So.
Yeah. Well, I don't do a lot of the more than, mic on the back. I remember doing that on Will Kimbrough's record and loving it years ago. And then I think I got lazy and I forgot to start doing it again.
Totally.
And I'm looking for the name of the artist that I'm thinking of, and dang it, I can't find it fast enough. It's great guitar player, singer that Sean Everett produced. And she regularly does it like that. And when she came into my studio at the Bonnaroo Hay Bale studio, she said, "Oh, just put Margaret Glaspie. There you go."
Oh, Glaspie,
yeah, Emotions and Math. That record. She requested. She said, "Put a mic on the front and the back, 57s, and pan them left and right," and it sounded awesome.
Oh wow,
totally
that's awesome.
Little Fender Champ or something like that.
Oh yeah, totally. Man,
Great
it's
sound.
so great. The back of the amp thing, I learned from Sean Everett. I'm going to go ahead and just get this out there. I'm a
Sure.
big old Sean Everett fan. Absolutely love everything that guy has worked on. I think he is like a hero when it comes to just recording and mixing. He's just such a freak. Love it. But yeah, got that idea from him, and I like I'll hear a little idea like that, and a lot of times I'm like, I don't want to hear anything else about it. I just want to start experimenting with it because I'm afraid that I'll start getting in my head too much about like, well, what is it that's being achieved here? So one of the things I've loved doing with the back of the amp thing is when I mic that up, like compressing the crap out of the back one.
Oh, cool.
And it's like the low end gets really weird and super interesting because you're obviously with a ribbon back there, you're just getting so much low end. But it just sounds awesome that compressed. So
the 4038, we're talking about the Coles, right? Yeah. Yes, I have one of those. I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah.
How about compressors? I mean, of course, you have a 660 floating around the studio. What are the rest of us going to do?
Yeah. The 660 plugin.
No, you have the Fairchild 660. Oh, that's what we get to use. Yeah.
Yeah.
The old Bomb Factory. It sounds exactly the same.
Yeah, there you go. No, I mean, do you know what's funny? I borrowed a 1176, a Rev H 1176, which is the silver face from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I borrowed one of those from a friend of mine for, it was maybe the last 6 months or so as he was transitioning his studio. And I had used 1176s before, but that thing blew my mind. It quickly became my favorite compressor. And there's something about that thing. I was told that what is it called? The LA3A or whatever.
Yeah.
That the output was like the same output as the LA3A maybe. And then on the front end, it's something else. So anyway, there's some weird Frankenstein thing about that unit itself. But man, that thing on kick drums and bass guitar and vocals is just like insane.
Would you use it while you were recording, or would you then take it out and run it back through and treat it like a one-track stem?
Both. Yeah, both. I would track kick. I have a retro power strip, and I love my kick in to be running through that power strip. And then from the power strip into the 1176, I loved this compressor so much that I just bought one. So I'm really pumped about it. And surprisingly, for an 1176, like on the lower end, price wise, you can buy a Rev H for like $2,600.
Which is funny that that's become the lower end.
I know, isn't that funny? But it's true. It's like those compressors are wild expensive. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I love the fact that like our kids, I don't know if you have children, but if you do, our kids' college tuitions are tied up in the racks of our gear in the studio.
Mine especially is, yeah, definitely. He's, I have an 8-year-old boy. Yeah. But yeah, so
the Silverface, yeah.
Yeah, the Silverface. I love that compressor. I don't have a ton of outboard gear. That's like, it's something that I've kind of like built up over time. A few pieces here and there, but for the most part, those are kind of the two that I've loved the most. When I'm tracking, I have tracked through the Fairchild. So I'll do vocals through hitting a Neve 1073 and then straight into the Fairchild. And that's always been my chain for that. That's always my snare drum chain. Yeah.
Did you get yourself like a bunch of 1073s, or did you just say I just need one good one?
Just one. Yeah, just one.
And is it a Neve or is it a different one?
It's an old Brent Averill.
Okay,
it's like
cool.
Probably from the, I want to say it's probably from the early 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1073s are so great.
Man,
I had a 1079 in my studio for a while, and I found I wasn't using it enough. So one Christmas I sold it and,
oh man,
put Christmas presents under the tree, but it's
there you
all
go.
right.
Well,
do what you got to do.
Do what you got to do. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Very cool. Well, so let's see. What about bass? How do you like to record your bass? What's the killer way to get an amazing bass sound, other than hiring you to play it?
Oh, well, if you hire me to play bass, the main thing you need to know is that you're going to have to wait for a really long time, because I take forever to write my bass parts and like kind of obsess over them way too long. But yeah, as far as recording bass, man, I constantly change what I'm doing. I've never had a time where I've done the same thing over and over and over. It's always like, I will track. So I have one of those Nobles.
What's that?
The Noble DI. Have you ever seen those before?
No, I haven't used it. No.
Man, they are so great. Guy out of, I believe, San Francisco who hand wires them. It's a DI, but it's a preamp, and the thing's just incredible. You should look it up. But it's a tube DI preamp thing, and I'll run through that first, and then I will go into typically the retro power strip, maybe a little bit of EQ on the front end. Typically when I'm recording bass on the go down, I'm just shaping the top end of the bass. I won't do a lot of shaping the low end. I'm just kind of trusting it. And then if there's any shaping of the low end that needs to happen, I'll do it on the back end. Unless I'm recording a part that's so specifically like weird and filtered sounding or something like that.
Right.
But I'll always take that DI because the DI always feels nice. And then I'll run out to a small amp. I swap it around. Sometimes it's a guitar amp, and I'm literally just looking for the interesting top end from that. And
how do you capture that interesting top end off the amp? Do you have to? Is it important which mic you choose, and do you have to do something to filter out the lows or anything like that?
No, I will grab. I'll mic it frequently the same way I'm miking a guitar amp. With a 57 or something like that. If I do want to capture some low end for bass, I'll use I use that M88 TG mic. Are you familiar with those? The Biodynamic.
I know the M88, but I don't know about the TG.
Yeah, it's just a dynamic hypercardioid mic, and it sounds so great. For bass amps, it's phenomenal. So I'll use that if I'm trying to capture low end. And then as far as the top end part, I have a few random weird old crappy mics, and those mics always end up yielding the funnest results. Right. I have this old Lafayette mic that I use a lot. That's really cool.
So you're taking a direct bass sound that sounds awesome on its own, but you're also creating this guitar thing through a guitar amp and then miking that up.
Exactly.
And do you find, do the low end of the amp and the DI compete with each other at times? How do you address that? And do you have to time align these two things to make it work, or are we overthinking it?
No, I never have to do that. I've never done any time aligning or anything like that. There are rare occasions where one of the mics that I take on the amp or something no matter what I do to it, it like doesn't quite sound right with the direct line. And in some cases, there's sort of been an insurance policy of, well, I can lean heavily into the DI, or I can lean heavily into the, just use the couple of mics that I threw on the amp, which end up sounding really cool. on there's a lot of experimentation that goes into it.
Right.
So, and that's not to sound fancy. That's just to say, like, a lot of times I'm just kind of screwing around to see what happens.
So one of the things that I think is important to mention, though, which is just we haven't mentioned it yet. It's assumed, but you know, the difference in recording a bass player that's on a session with a band playing versus doing the overdub yourself is just how much control you can get over a bass recording when you're in the control room listening on the very same speakers that you're trying to get the low end right on.
Exactly. That's such a good point. Yeah. And I think that is a big part of it. It's sitting there and really, you know, I can also, for the thing, I'll sit there. I might swap through at least 3 bass guitars before I'm like, oh, this is totally the one. And I might be playing that thing so quiet. Something I love is to play bass super, super quiet, like barely touching the thing.
Fingers or pick?
Fingers a lot. I'm mostly fingers. But just playing so super quiet and just cranking that thing like as much as you can. Mm-hmm. And getting so much of the tone out of the compressor that you're using, or the preamp that you're using, and sometimes in some cases the pedal that you're running it through or whatever.
Okay, so if we were like, all right, I'm allowed to go to the store and get 3 basses now to start my bass collection in the studio. Right. Which ones should we get?
P-bass. P-basses are the coolest. P-bass with flat wounds, I just think is like one of the most wonderful sounding things. It ends up beating other basses out for me all the time. Mm-hmm. But that's a great thing. I would say a P-bass would be great. And then I can tell you what my collection is. I don't know what other people should do, but I have a Silvertone 1444, I think is what it's called. That is from the 60s. It's one of those little black basses.
Is it the kind of lipstick pickup?
Yeah, it's got one lipstick pickup in it. And that thing sounds so cool. Use it all the time. The principle there to me would be something old and weird. Something that is always, you might pick it up some days and be like, that is definitely not the right thing to be playing for this song. You want to have something, I would say you want to have something in your arsenal that's like definitely almost a one-trick pony, if not a 2-trick pony, you know?
Whereas the P-bass is more like might work for most things.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I feel like you could get that to sound however you want it to sound just by adjusting some things tone-wise and maybe a pedal here or there.
Look, every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage series are built by hand in Latvia, using only the best electronic components, and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer only available to you, Rockstars. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTARS to get 50% off the vintage series mics V67, V47, and the new V12 at jzmic.com. Adam Audio designs monitors with a mission to bring accuracy, transparency, and high definition to your studio, guiding you each step of the way on your journey from starting out in a home studio to installing your ultimate mixing setup in your pro studio. Check out their complete line of speakers and headphones, from the T-Series to the AX Series to their top-of-the-line S-Series, which all use the unique ART-accelerated ribbon tweeter design, famous for creating smooth, detailed imaging that let your speakers disappear into into your music. Want to feel awesome to make brilliantly accurate creative decisions in your mixes because you can finally hear your music clearly? Your ears are the greatest instrument you have, and if you can hear the music, then you can mix the music. Visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for lots of cool free interviews, tutorials, masterclasses, and learn how to set up your studio monitors and control room. Just click the link in the show notes of this episode. So quick question about the P-Bass. So because it's such a ubiquitous model of the instrument, we're going to find new ones, old ones, one's made in Korea, one's made in Mexico, one's made in the US. Are there any like go-to things? Like if you just picked up a bass and didn't even plug it in, can you tell if it's going to be a good bass that way? Are there any like tips for us as far as just making sure we choose a good instrument?
I feel like for me, my bass journey has been really weird. My basses have been gifts from people, which is so weird, but and so awesome. But
so we just got to get somebody to give us one. Is that the same person that's going to give us the Fairchild 660?
No. This is a different person. Right. Both very generous people, though. My P bass is a 71. I think. I would say that the times I've been most impressed, and this would go for guitars too, is when it feels good to play. And that's something I actually, little suggestion I got from my buddy Taylor York, who told me, like, when you're picking a guitar, like go after the thing that feels really great to play, that feels inspiring to play. Because if it feels great, chances are you're going to be able to get great stuff out of it. So I always thought that was great advice. I would say the same thing for bass. I'll occasionally pop over to Fanny's or something and pick up a bass and thump around or whatever.
Cool stuff over there.
Yeah, and if you plug it in and there's just an instant like. It's so subjective. Some people are looking for, a really tight low end and, crazy, whatever it is. And I think for me, it probably leans more into character. Like, do you start playing it and think, oh my gosh, I am like almost imagining a song that I want to like write on this thing.
Yeah.
So I'll tend to focus on that. That was such a long-winded way of answering. No,
it's all right.
Question.
I mean, but part of it is me wondering, like with the bass, for example, it's a low end is important, and it is possible, right, that some basses the low open E sings, and on other ones it doesn't sing. It just kind of evaporates or disappears. And I wondered. I was just thinking about it. I was trying to decide. I was like, if you're not even plugged in, can you tell if a bass is going to sing down in the low end or not? I'm sure the bass players out listening to this right now, the other ones are like, dude, come on. Yeah, of course, or whatever.
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah.
They're hammering their car dashboard right now listening to the podcast.
This guy sucks. He doesn't know anything about bass. Man, I don't know. I think because every bass like feels so different when you play it, like I have this old PV bass. It's a T40. They kind of got popular because they look cool. And but they have this little bit, there's like a setting that sounds a little bit like a Rickenbacker, classic Rick bass. I don't remember the model number of that bass, but and then there, in another setting, it kind of sounds like a Music Man. And I got it for those two reasons, because those are two things that I was like, man, that'd be kind of fun to be able to get in the realm of those tones, which my P bass doesn't do super well. But when I picked up that bass for the first time and played it, I was like, this thing feels weird. Like it does not feel great. And I had it set up and it felt a lot better. But I would say, based on just picking up that bass, I would have never thought it would sound as cool as it ended up sounding.
Right. So basically you just debunked your own theory.
Exactly. So I think a lot of it just has to do with like, kind of taking time to learn what that instrument does and finding out if it's the right thing for you.
Yeah, I have guitars where that's happened to me too.
Totally. I use that bass, that PVT 40 on the newest Louis Prince song that came out, Yes Indeed.
Oh, cool. Right on.
And knowing that is funny because I love the way that bass turned out. I love the sound of the bass on that song. And that's just a freaking PV bass that I bought for $400.
Yeah, I have a guitar it's like a weird hollow body, and it has a Yamaha neck where somebody's like crossed out the Yamaha. And I think it was like a hybrid that they threw together. And it always sounded messed up to me. I was like, I can't really use this at all. I don't know. Maybe I don't need it. And then one day I just picked it up when I was doing my record with the right amp combo, and it was like the ultimate sound. And in fact, put in a little context, that was my main guitar for doing my instrumental record, Skadoosh, which is all the music that we use in the podcast.
Oh man, that's
all the music
wow.
notes.
That stuff sounds great.
Thanks.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
I love this though. I love the like diving into, just exploring with some of these instruments that are not like super coveted instruments, but like you end up finding a really cool use for it. Somebody else in town who does that a lot that I am really inspired by how many guitars he has sitting around his studio is Kyle Ryan. Do you know Kyle Ryan?
I don't know, not yet.
He's so great. You should talk to Kyle too. He's phenomenal.
Cool. Love to.
But yeah, Kyle is like, you walk through his studio and he's got like, you'll see something that looks like a Rickenbacker guitar and you'll pick it up and he's like, that's fake. It's not a real Rickenbacker. He's like, right. I found it at a pawn shop in Cincinnati or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's just so many fun things to discover in those weird, sometimes one of a kind, 100 of a kind of guitars.
What's the third bass?
We
got the P bass, the Silvertone 1444.
Yeah, I've got an old SG. It's a super old SG. I think it's a 61. And that thing is just, gosh, talk about a one-trick pony.
Isn't it called the Zero or something? What's the model?
I think that's what it's called. I actually don't even know.
I'll look it up while you're chatting.
Yeah, it's like it is.
Yeah, EBO, Gibson EB0. Yeah,
there you go.
Great. It's super subby.
Oh, so subby, and it's got the little toggle switch on it. And one seems to have like a lot less low end and the other, but it's one pickup. So I'm like, I guess I don't do any reading about any of the stuff that I have. I'm just like, I don't know. It's a bass, but it sounds so cool. It's, I've used that bass probably the least out of all my basses, but when I do, it's always interesting. It's super microphonic. So, almost anytime I'm soloing that thing, I can hear the track cranking through.
That's when you learn, sometimes when you're overdubbing in the control room, do not have the click track cranked up.
Right. The other thing that's really fun to try that I did, this song is not out yet, but I think it's coming soon, maybe this year. I recorded a song for Molly Parden and I played bass on the song, and I stereo mic'd the fretboard, and that was the first time I had ever done that, but it was so fun. And the sound that we got from stereo miking that fretboard
on a bass overdub or on
yes.
Really?
So I had to be on headphones and I used 2 KM 184s and I put it right around the 10th fret like you would on like an acoustic guitar or something. And just cranked those suckers and took a bunch of top end out and compressed them. And they, like every slide and every movement, you just get this like ultra chunky, it's almost like turns your bass sound. So I had like a DI going, but then I had the mics going as well. So then you almost get this like upright thing, but it's like unlike any upright you've ever heard. It's really weird. So weird and fun.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm looking at some of the notes I've got here. I mean, so many cool records in there. Let's talk about drums actually too. So,
Yeah.
you quickly went over that. And one of the things that's cool about your records is the drums. They seem like they may be programmed just because the sounds sound like they have that perfect, consistency of a sample, but they feel just right against the guitars and bass in a way that makes me think, oh, this is like what would be played. So then I just want to ask, like, what's your process? You talked about having a drummer in there. Do you have a process of like combining the feel of real drums and what a drummer would do, but getting the sounds that sound like it was programmed that way? And is there sort of a method that we could have as a takeaway?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, for the most part, any programming that happens is not the stuff that sounds like drums. So, in other words, most of what you're hearing is all the actual drummer and the actual drum sounds that are recorded.
Wow. Those kicks and snares that sound just like fucking great.
Oh, thanks, man.
Real drums.
Yeah. And so much of that has to do with those dang drummers. Oh my gosh. They're just like, I've had the privilege to work with two phenomenal drummers. One doesn't live in Nashville anymore. Dabney Morris, actually does a lot of string ranging, out there and writing for film score and stuff like that. But both him, Dabney Morris, and Dan Burns are just like wild drummers, both jazz backgrounds, which I think is kind of first part of the ingredient. I think that is important to point out is very much the drummer and the way they think about drums.
Yeah.
And play. Both are extremely light players, like they play quiet, which just, really ends up being kind of the beginning part or the first ingredient of being like, oh, we can really crank these guys and make them sound really interesting. And almost anything you do, any adjustment you make mic wise or positioning or towel wise over something or whatever it is means so much more because they're playing so quiet. So you're getting a wider range of weirdness from them. But as far as like as far as the drums go across the board, I mic pretty traditionally. So I'll do like stereo Coles 4038s for overheads, and I have a knee. My favorite knee mic is an SM7. I think it's so great. It's so boring.
Where does that go?
It's so good.
Well, tell us about a knee mic.
Yeah, I know. Good night. Well, it's like everyone's knee mic looks different, doesn't it? Mine is directly centered over the kick drum, and it is wildly close to the kick drum, pointing at the drummer's knee.
Okay, not even pointed towards the snare.
No, pointed straight at the drummer's knee. So right down the middle. And I've always done it this way. And I promise you right now, I wish I could tell you that it was because I like found out this awesome scientific thing. It absolutely is not. It's that someone told me you should try a knee mic, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll do this. And I saw one picture, and that's the way I've always done it.
And what about the settings? Because an SM7B gives you a low cut and a mid boost.
Totally. No, it's flat. It's just flat.
Cool.
And I have had times where the primary kick and snare sound that I end up with, like the majority of that is coming from that knee. And a lot of the interesting slap or attack of the kick drum is coming from that knee mic. It's really, really cool. So the one thing I would say is that it's really helpful to make sure that knee is very much in phase with the kick mic or kick mics, right, if you're doing multiples, because you might end up loving that. Also, should say that the knee mic is 20 toward the it's closest to the back part of the drum, so it's not
that's good tip.
Yeah, right, totally. So that helps you get those that in phase with the kick in mic. I'll typically like have.
So it might. Sorry, just to clarify that. Yeah. So there might be a mic inside the kick drum, and then the knee mic might be exactly in line with it, but just above the kick and outside of the shell. Okay,
exactly. And as long as those are in phase with each other, it you can use both of them. And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that knee mic ends up being surprisingly like so juicy and wonderful in the final mix. Like I'll use that. And there's something really controlled about that microphone. That's why I like it as a knee. I've tried other mics as a knee, and I've done ribbon mics as a knee. I've tried, different other dynamics. I've tried all sorts of stuff. There's something super shaped and controlled about that mic. And I just think that in the knee application, it's really cool. So this is definitely, and I'll compress that pretty hard going in.
Right, I was going to ask you about that.
An LA610. I just have one of those little LA610 channel strip guys, and I'll use the compressor on there. But yeah, so that, and then kick drum, I like to use 2 to 3 mics on the kick. Just depends on what I'm doing and what it's for. But yeah, and then standard top and snare, top and bottom snare. And then I like to use, close mic, my toms, I use 421s. And then I have like sort of permanent contact mics on my toms. What
do those do?
They are just giving me knock from the tom.
Interesting. Contact meaning they're literally just connected to the sides of the shells or something.
Well, they're actually connected to the head. So like if you imagine a Remo drum head, I'll use like, there's these contact mics that you can get 5 of them for, I think it's like $15 for 5 of them. They're so cheap. You're not looking for any beauty from this microphone. You're just looking for an interesting knock and an interesting attack to mix in with your other mic.
Cool.
And it gives you a lot of weird mid-range. And I love that in toms.
And did they come out as a 1/4-inch jack kind of thing? Or
it's a 1/4-inch jack. And so you have to DI those.
So I think I got some of those at one point too, off eBay or somewhere. And they were like they're basically like piezo pickups that are dipped in that kind of rubberized stuff with a cable coming out in a 1/4-inch jack. And they were marketed more like triggers, But it's cool to hear that you use them as the mic, for their sound. So that's great.
Yeah. Well, that's another Sean Everett thing there. Is I think at one point
Sean's always coming back on the show.
We love you, Sean. I think at one point I heard that he was like taping them to the drumsticks. It's like, great. What the heck?
So every time the drumstick hits, you hear it.
Yeah, exactly. So then that sent me down this rabbit trail of like trying to put them on everything. I was like, oh man, that's so cool. I've had success. I've used them on nylon string guitars and then run that through a guitar amp. And then that's my electric guitar, and it sounds bonkers. It's so fun.
I did something a little similar. I clamped it onto the headstock of a guitar and did that through something. And I was trying to get the Frank Zappa thing. So Zappa would he'd have the pickup, but then he'd also have a piezo pickup in his electric, and then he would blend those together, and that's how you get like that kind of twangy guitar tone. But we also did it on a piano. So I stuck it, I like clamped it to the harp at the far end of the piano, and then we ran that out to an amp and through Verb in the other room, and then certain single notes. You got this great, double piano sound. So
yes, I love that too.
Those things are cool.
I have those on my piano as well. I have an upright, and I have them in the same place you're talking about. It's just so interesting. It's like ugly, but it's it's an instant ugly that you don't have to go chasing after the fact. That's really cool. Just put a bunch of spring reverb on those, and then you've got this weird version of your piano without having much work to do, you know?
Yeah, and I think, so it comes out at a pickup level. So if you're going to get fancy, you can run into the control room, you know, mic pre it up, and then start processing it. But I think if you just have like kind of a gain guitar pedal, you could plug it straight into that and kind of gain it up there a little before other stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done that on piano.
Can you plug it straight into a guitar amp without going through anything at all?
I think you can. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay.
And you know, they sound like it's really funny because sometimes they're also like kind of notorious for being like buzzy. So like you have to be, there's like times when, I don't know, you have to like shake them and tell them you love them, and then they'll work better the next time or whatever. But a lot of times I just end up sending them through mic pre's, and in relation to the drums.
Yeah. So just to reinforce that, Rockstars, I just pulled up on Amazon a 5-piece is a 5-way, like 5 individual piezo contact microphone collection is $16.
Yeah. Yeah. So cheap. Right. And the thing that's cool is like, you know, you break one of them, it's like, you know, just buy another pack. And I think I'm due for another pack. But those, man, contact mics, there's also other versions that you can buy that are actual clip-on ones. I think Korg makes some. And
yeah, I'm looking at one right now. Yeah.
Flanger, I think, is another brand.
CM200BK clip-on contact microphone from Korg.
There you go. I've got one of those. And the trick there is to buy the tuner version. It says it's a clip-on tuner, but it is the same exact thing. It's just like $15 cheaper.
Right. So if $22 is outside of your budget,
but by the end of this, someone's going to be like, "Man, this guy is so cheap." And
no, somebody went and bought them all, and then they listen to like, "This sounds terrible."
It's so good. No. But yeah, so contact mics are always so fun to me. I just think they're interesting, and I'll take. It's gotten to the point now where I take them, even if I don't think I'm gonna want them, because it just doesn't hurt to do it. If you have the channels, just do it. And there's always something weird that happens. Like I've had moments where like the coolest thing that ends up becoming a centerpiece of a song is because the contact mic was falling off. And it's like something that we're like, whoa, that is the cymbal sound. Is like the sound of the cymbal coming through this contact mic.
The OWC Envoy Pro Electron is the fastest, toughest, mini-sized, universal, portable USB-C SSD that lets you record from anywhere in the galaxy with confidence. With speeds of up to more than a gigabyte per second real-world performance, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron gives you high-speed audio data for recording and playback. Take your sessions and sample libraries with you anywhere you go. Built for reliability, the OWC Envoy Pro Electron is waterproof, dustproof, and crushproof. Never worry about your storage and the safety of your music again. Find the new OWC Envoy Pro Electron and all your storage needs at macsales.com/rockstars. That reminds me too of something else I read about somewhere, or it was like a blog, it was an article or something. It was about how to make your own Bluetooth speaker out of anything, but at the core of it was talking about getting tactile transducers. And I'm looking one on Amazon right now. So you can get a bass shaker that has 2 speaker inputs into it that you can bolt underneath the seat. So like you can kind of, and it's $120. You could make yourself like a bass butt thing for like a chair for the bass player out in the, well, you're a bass player.
Oh my gosh.
You know, like if you're out on the floor and you don't feel any low end out of the bass, I thought that would be a lot of fun, is to kind of create your own, you know, where you get all the thump out of it.
Oh, that's amazing. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. You're gonna have to send me some of this stuff afterwards.
Yeah, it's the one I'm looking at is called the Aura Sound AST 2B4 Pro Bass Shaker Tactile Transducer. All right,
that's amazing.
I'm turning the podcast back over to you, Micah. Sorry about that.
No, I love it. I was just gonna say that. What did you say it was? 120?
Yeah, like 120 for that, and I think they have cheaper ones too, but. Yeah, I don't know which ones are good.
The cheaper ones is the thing that I'm going to look up because you know me.
Yeah, go cheap. Cheapo. When in doubt, cheap out.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So as far as drums, I like. For the longest time, I was doing all the standard stuff. I think for me, the thing that ends up being the most fun is to experiment with your mics. I think there's a constant, for a very long time, I had a constant fear of setting up a mic and then it being out of phase and I just can't fix it later, because typically I'm engineering everything that I'm producing. So there are moments where mics get thrown up and then I'm like, I didn't have time to check that, but I'm just going to trust that it's going to work or whatever. I would say 9 times out of 10, it works. It's like there's something that happens where you're like, oh, this is out of phase, but when I flip the phase on this one, it feels great and everything else still feels great. So I'm going to do that. And like, I think the thing there is to experiment and to try to put into words ahead of time what you're going after. And get specific with it, because if you can, and you start thinking from a more commitment level, which can be scary, whatever it is, you have a drummer coming in for maybe a short amount of time or whatever, and you want to make sure you get something. And chances are that whatever it is that you're getting, you're going to be safe either way. So you might as well, if you have the channels, you might as well play with those channels and try different things. Hence the contact mics. And
I mean, like take more than you need, and don't sweat knowing exactly what it's going to be good for just yet.
Yeah, and mute it on the way in if you didn't quite get it right where you need it to be. Like, don't worry about it. Like, just get like a good level of it. It might end up being the thing that like makes your drum sound really wild and really interesting. So the principle there is,
but if you don't record it, you don't have it.
You don't have it, and you're using 40 plugins to try to find some special thing out of your drums that you didn't quite capture.
Yeah.
I think a big part of that too is just the fun of the exploration, like knowing that like you might end up with, at the end of the week, you might end up with a trick that you incorporate frequently because you just love it so much. And it's a very specific thing. I have this big Ampeg V4 amp. It's the heaviest amp ever. And man, that amp sounds so cool. And the spring reverb on it sounds incredible. And I was working on some drums once, and I knew that I wanted reverb. I knew that I wanted spring reverb on the drums, but I wanted it primarily to be sourced from the kick drum. So I put that amp on the other side of the room, and I ran a sub mic to the amp and turned all the treble down on the amp and then mic'd that amp. So the sub mic was actually on the kick drum, but it was running to the amp. I'm trying to remember how I did this actually. And I'm like thinking
maybe you needed a mic preamp. Well, they also, what you needed? You just needed one of those high Z, low Z, little inline connectors. I've got one of those too. That'll go from XLR down to a 1/4 inch for you.
Totally. You know what it was? I think it was actually a cheaper microphone that had a 1/4 inch jack on the end of it. It was like one of those tape machine microphones that come with like a small tape machine. That was in the kick drum, and that was running to the amp. And then I had a sub. That's what it was. I had a sub mic on the amp itself with the spring reverb cranked. And so while he's doing these drum takes, that spring is like getting triggered and it's also being picked up in all the microphones on the kit. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, this could be a nightmare later, because there's just this spring reverb from the amp in the room getting into every mic.
Yeah.
And it was the opposite. It was like the coolest. It just ended up being the raddest thing on that song.
Do you remember which song that was?
It's not out yet.
Okay,
that's on the new Louis Prince record. But
it might be out by the time the podcast comes out.
Well, technically it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be October that it's coming out.
There you go.
But yeah, I think all that to say, so fun to like just try stuff. And if you have some sort of sense of how you want, one of the things I mentioned in kind of the questions that I answered prior to the episode was like how important this relationship between engineering and mixing is in the scope of a record, and making sure that there's clear vision in the beginning so that an engineer can really capture the thing that even the mixer is hoping for at the end of the project to sort of be able to work with. And so one of the things that's awesome about getting to do a lot of it from start to finish on a project is that I can start to think mix-wise from like day one and start imagining how this could all be put together, this specific drum mix, or the mix of the song as a whole is going to end up getting translated. In the end, it just really helps, because then you can go into it with a lot less fear about like commitment to the very specific sound that you're after or something.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, one of the places you do that a fair amount in your productions is in the vocals. Louis Prince, Row, Tired Love, both of those I noticed had like, real interesting use of vocoders, or the vocals have different kinds of delays and reverbs and different vocal parts. And I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that. I mean, like, what is a cool way to start using a vocoder in our production?
Yeah, totally. I think it's with like a vocoder thing, I think that a lot of times, so with Louis Prince, there are moments of actual like harmonizers in the 13 record that you're referencing. There are other songs. I think there's maybe only a couple of songs that have harmonizer on them, but as a whole, we kind of went after like, let's create like a real harmonizer sort of effect by stacking.
Wow.
So some of those songs actually have like, you're just hearing stacks with harmonies as well.
That's kind of a Billie Eilish thing too, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, she has absolutely conquered that. Yeah, just trying to like create the same emotion. It's such a production trick, right? I mean, so much of that is like not transferable live outside of the track realm.
Right.
But so interesting for the recording process. You can really, if you lean in a little bit more, and instead of doing 1 or 2 doubles, end up doing 5 doubles, and really spreading those out across the stereo spectrum. It's kind of a nightmare, but you can get into a fun realm of editing the doubles to make sure that the consonants and everything's lining up really well to the main lead vocal pass. And it just ends up creating this feeling of like, otherworldliness vocal. It's just like, how is that possible?
So if you're going to edit those, let's dig into that a minute. Obviously, we have tools like Melodyne, which can help make that a little easier. Do you sometimes use those? Have you found that you do or don't like going that direction? And when you're editing, are you like chopping a word into 5 different bits and then kind of scooting it around and crossfading it back together?
Yeah. So I have not yet found a software there's people that have told me like, oh, you should try this. And I probably should try them. I think I've gotten so into my mode of how I do it with literally just visually editing in Pro Tools. So yes, the answer is there is some of that that's going on. For the most part, with the singers that I'm working with, they're giving me like really close. I mean, they're like unbelievably close to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So you're really just going through and visually going like, oh, that felt a little flammy. I'm literally just going to, in this entire pre-chorus, this one part felt a little flammy. I'm going to like make sure I can tighten up those consonants and sounds.
And do you need things like panned out properly at that point? And do you have to like then also double check it in mono or anything like that?
No, I never double check any of it in mono. But yes, panning them out sometimes is the right move for that kind of effect. Once you get over 4 of the same vocal, it starts to get so chorusy sounding, which is really cool. And the tighter you make sure those certain moments are, it feels that more crazy, So that's why I go into that realm.
That's really fun.
So fun. As far as like harmonizers and vocoders, though, I really like to think of that stuff as like a supplementary thing. If it's like something you're looking for, there's a song on that Louis Prince record that we used 3 different types of harmonizers. And they were all plugins. One was the Octavox by Eventide.
Oh yeah.
And then another one was the Eventide. It's more of like a delay unit. What is that one called? It's like the 910 or 9.
Yeah, the 910 or the 9.
I can't remember. It's a UAD plugin as well.
It's like an H940 or something, right? What is it?
Yeah, something like that. How do they expect us to remember all these stupid numbers?
I don't know. And I'm on the spot because I'm supposed to remember them all, but I'm just like everybody. I can't keep them all in my head anymore. Yep. Anyway, the point is the Eventide Harmonizer plugins are fantastic.
Totally. Yeah. And going through and just being like, oh, we want this part to sound different. Like it needs to sound more like this. And so just kind of messing around with different things, I think has been fun. I guess we used a little bit on the roast stuff as well.
I was right. The H949.
Oh, there you go. There it is. Yeah. And with her, I mean, she's just like such a wild singer to begin with, like very, very great vocalist. So it was more like, oh, this would be fun to experiment with, kind of layering her vocal with something like that. So
when you're messing around with delays, your tape echoes and stuff like that too, do you sort of take the vocal and just bring the echo back in on another track and just start messing with it? And then when something cool happens, now you've captured it and you start treating it more like just a sample that you're going to use in that moment?
Yeah, sometimes it ends up working out like that. I typically will, like at the top of, unless it ends up informing the production in a huge way, which I do so much mixing as I go, especially if I know that I'm going to end up mixing the project in the end. But yes, so I will do printing through both of my my tape echoes and just have my hands on the knobs the entire time as I'm printing it. And it's just so much more fun to me when it becomes an audio file, and then I can then like and I'll do a few passes. And if there's just a few magic moments of messing with the feedback or even just messing with the time itself, along with the vocal. So yeah, I will just print those and I'll give myself a lot to work with in the mixing process.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the benefits to treating things outside of the computer and capturing that way is, unlike, plugins will repeat what you did, but not always, sometimes they do it a little different next time. And there's a high level of trust that we place in the computer and the plugins when we're expecting it to set it, and then now that's how it's going to sound always. And it's one of the nice things about treating stuff and re-recording it is it's captured. It's never going to change. It's always going to play back that same way. And, again, you mentioned Sean Everett. I mean, I think he talks about that too. I think he does a lot of stuff just manually editing it in Pro Tools until it's right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the same thing for me too. There is this thing where you feel like when it's right, and I think when you trust that and you're printing this stuff in to Pro Tools, it's just so helpful for it to be malleable and to be able to think of it not as like, oh, well, this is the way it happened in real time, so it needs to stay this way, but just letting it be a malleable thing, know?
Yeah. Daniel Slett, that was another one when he was on the show. He talked about doing a lot of micro editing in Pro Tools to get things to sound right. Howdy, rock stars. Do you feel like the time you've spent watching YouTube videos, trying out mix tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes has gotten you nowhere? Have you been looking for a simple, straightforward, step-by-step process for creating a pro mix that won't take years to learn? If you struggle with any of these questions, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover the proven step-by-step mix system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating a pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Here are just some of the things that students are saying about the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass. This one comes from David P. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. And Shane J says, I've literally watched it 2 times at length, taken a plethora of notes, then combed back over some sections even more. You really knocked it out of the park on this one, and it was so incredibly eye-opening and useful immediately. Look, it's a lot of fun to mix. I'm like you, but it can be really frustrating to keep doing the same things over and over again, but not getting the results that you really want. So when you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go check out ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and get started now using the free preview button where you can immediately watch Craig's ultimate snare mixing trick. Happy mixing, rock stars. All right, so let's see. I've got a question here from one of the rock stars that I thought I'd hit you up with before we close out. This comes in from Jason Reynolds, and his question, it's not specifically for you, it's just a general question, but what's the best way for DIY ear training to learn EQ and compression, how to really learn theories, frequencies, shelving, Q, etc. So I'm not trying to put you on the spot like a, PhD professor about that, more like what's your take on that? Like how do you advise other people to learn EQ and compression and all that, any of that stuff?
Yeah, I love that. I can only speak to the way I learned, which is like not that sexy. I think the time when it really shifted for me was the first time I got Pro Q, the FabFilter Pro Q2 plugin.
Nice.
And now I'm using Pro Q3, of course. But as soon as I could solo frequencies, that's a feature within their plugin. It sounds dumb to like start talking about a plugin in terms of this, but I really do think that plugin has a way of teaching you and helping you begin to, the more you use it, it almost helps you memorize frequencies better.
Because now you can hear it, right?
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful visual, and you can solo something really quickly and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly where this problem is if you have a problem frequency. Or if you're trying to, sometimes I'll pull up Pro Q before I put on like a cooler EQ, like say I'm going to use the Pultec Legacy, whatever it is, to add some top end or something like that. I'll pull up Pro Q first and figure out exactly what it is that I'm looking for, where I'm looking for it. And then I'll go find the plugin that does that range, in my opinion, that does that range the best.
Right.
Just to kind of show myself really quickly, oh, okay, it's around 8 or it's whatever it is. So I think a big part of it is playing with, when we're talking specifically about frequencies, playing with Pro Q3. If you can get your hands on that, I think it's one of the best teachers a mixer or home recording person has to be able to learn frequency and stuff like that.
That's great. That's a really good tip. Is there, I don't know if you remember this, but is there actually like kind of a quick key ability to solo things, or do you just kind of use your mouse to?
I think you just hold it down. Like once you like actually hold it down or like click down, it'll solo. Or maybe you have to hit a solo button. I can't remember. Whatever it is, it's super intuitive and it's very easy. So
I like that idea. Holding down the button sounds like the way to do it.
Yeah, it's great. And you can sweep that way across the spectrum to find your frequency. And yeah, it's great. And then also on the Pro Q3, they've got that dynamic EQ function as well, which is amazing. Yep. So if you just want to tame something temporarily, now we're just talking about Pro Q. But point is, such a great teacher. I think that that plugin is a great way to learn.
And then what about compression? How do you feel like you learned what compressors do?
I'll let you know when I've learned what compressors do. No, I think that I think for me, it's just overly compressing things until you understand the sort of temperaments of the compressor that you're working with. I am like, I think that is a go-to across the board. It's like maybe the song needs reverb. And then my go-to is to put way too much reverb on, because then I know, well, that's absurd. And then I start to like dial it back down. So it's like almost too much first. That's the same way I like to think of compression, is I'll kind of go over the top in the beginning and push into it too hard. The benefit of that is you really start to, if you have attack and release that you're controlling, if you're pushing the input really hard in a compressor, what it's doing, what the attack and release is doing, it becomes so much more apparent when you're pushing really hard into it. So I just like to, I guess it's too much. Do it too much and then back it off until you're like, now that feels really open and big, but it has like a certain, to me, compression is just so, I think of it as an effect, and a lot of people don't think of it that way. Yep. I love thinking of it as an effect. It's super uninteresting to me in other forms when it's like subtle. I wish that I was the guy that was like, oh my gosh, when you put that, SSL G series on there and it's like hitting it, it's like one dB of compression. It just made everything perfect. I can't hear that. Right. So I don't know. That's kind of the way I think of. No, I dig it.
And it reminds me of a way that we do things, or tend to do things maybe when we're learning it, is we take what's already there and then we start, applying EQ and compression to things as this afterthought, or reverb or effects. And then the next move is, like you said, you go too far and then you bring it back and you're like, okay, if I bring it way down here, then it's okay. And you do that for a while, and then you end up with this thing where you're like, why does this whole mix sound like a big pile of shit? Totally. It's like everything, I just made everything, like perfectly beige, like there's nothing going on now. And so, but once you learn how to do things with an extreme thing, touch, and you know how to get really bold effects, it would be too much for the whole song. But once you know how to make that statement, then you start doing things that I hear you doing, Micah, which is like, all right, we're going to add a part to the song, and the part's only going to be this big, but it's going to go crazy through the compression for that one moment, and then it's out of the way. And then we're talking about production and getting sounds right at the source so that we're always mixing as we go.
Yes, absolutely. That's totally it. Yeah.
Awesome, dude. I got a last question for you. This one's hypothetical. You can take the Wayback Studio machine now, and you go back in time and you find young Micah, and you say, don't worry, dude, everybody will learn how to spell your last name one day. Right. By the way, Rockstars is Tawlks, Talks.
And they all just immediately forgot what you said, like immediately.
Exactly. So you go back in time, you find young Micah, and you say, listen, man, I've come back to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
Man, I think I would probably, I think so much of that kind of thing is definitely, you know, we learn at the pace we're supposed to learn, right? But I think if I was going to say anything, it would be, dude, drop the ego and really lean into the talent that you're working with. Lean into the people that you're working with. I think I would want to communicate that to myself, that when you have these people coming in to work, they have so much to put into what they're doing, and there's the younger years of me were a little fixated on, like, oh, what's my input into this, and how, and I think now I would just say, like, oh, just drop that and like just enjoy making music with people.
Right, right. Like, don't stress if you're not sure how you're supposed to make your mark in this moment.
Yes, exactly. Just go with it, enjoy it. When the vision feels clear, communicate that. When it doesn't, lean into other people. That's what this is. It's just, there's times where you start a record and you're actually the person who's learning. And I think that's a really, really cool thing about what we do.
Right on. I feel like that's a good takeaway for overdubs too. It's like when you're in the control room and you hear the part in your head, then go play it, versus the times where you're like, I'm just going to go noodle around on stuff and see what happens. And
totally,
you end up having to undo a lot of things.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, dude. Thanks so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us. What a blast to hang out with you. Let the Rockstars know, where can they go learn more about you? Where would you like them to go check out your work? What if they just need a killer producer and mixer to help make their next hit record?
Totally. Yeah. So, best way to contact me at the moment is through Instagram. DM me through Instagram. I don't have a website. So most of the work that I end up getting through DMs. And beyond that, I have a playlist, on Spotify called, Peptalk Production Playlist. And that I update pretty regularly whenever something goes up there. So if you want to listen to new stuff that's going on, jump on there and follow the bands, follow the artists that I'm working with. That's the real thing. We're making these records together, and they're the ones that are going out there and promoting these albums and making them everything that they are. So follow those folks too.
That's awesome, dude. It was a blast to meet you, man. Your music is great. Thanks so much to Cheyenne Medders for hooking us up.
Thank you, Cheyenne. Yeah. Love you, dude.
Another great musician and producer.
Yeah, man.
I look forward to seeing you in person, and I hope we get to make a record together sometime. We only have to drive across town, so there's not too much of a barrier there.
I would love to do that. We don't have any excuse. Let's do it.
All right, cool, dude. Great to meet you. We'll see you around, dude. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Liz Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Recording Studio Rockstars would like to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who have helped make this episode possible. OWC, Atom Audio, Spectra 1964, Isotope, and JZ Microphones. Remember to use the coupon codes ROCK10 at isotope.com/rockstars for 10% off any plugin purchase, or start your extended 30-day free trial subscription to get access to lots of plugins, and Rockstars at jzmic.com for 50% off select vintage series mics for a limited time. And remember to visit the Atom Audio YouTube channel for free interviews and masterclasses, and use the coupon code ROCKSTAR for 10% off any course at Recording Studio Rockstars Academy for a limited time. You'll find links to all these wonderful sponsors in the description of this podcast. These are all things I highly recommend for your studio. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I would also like to thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko, Braden Stremming, and John Richardson, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.